Inazuma 11 is a legendary, world-spanning series that will always hold an important place in my heart. Its blend of anime, football, strategy, and pure awesomeness was a perfect panacea for my middle-class malaise as a child. And as I discovered when I received a flood of nostalgia and reverence for the series in my comment section, the last video I released, many others share this view. But for a series so loved, it's strange that it's in many ways defined by its incompleteness. You see, the final piece in the legendary Go Trilogy never saw the light of day outside of Japan. Inazuma 11 Go Galaxy might have reached into space, but it still couldn't find the childhood homes of fans all across Europe. Some say it was because of a copyright dispute, others point towards the less than stellar financial performance of the game, but whatever the reason, its absence represents a noticeable blight on the series' legacy. But did we actually miss anything? Were fans so fixated on its absence that they ignored its lack of substance? Well, I'm here to actually answer this question, because you see, I've actually played through the Japanese version very extensively. Yes, I said that right, the Japanese version. You see, as a child, I was very impatient, which, as you all know, is a terrible habit for a JRPG enthusiast. Japanese companies are slower than Joe Biden when it comes to localization.
What's your message for Super Tuesday voters? Everyone.
And level 5 of Inazuma 11 weren't any different. Initially, I was able to cope with their slowness because the first and second game came out within less than a year of each other. But as the years and then months went by without the legendary Inazuma 11-3, I knew I would have to take drastic action to get my next fix. So I invested all my pocket money in a brand spanking new Japanese 3DS with a copy of Inazuma 11 Sekai no Chosen in tow. Initially, I somewhat regretted the decision. To say trying to understand a game full of Japanese text is difficult is like calling the situation in the Middle East a little touchy. But with a handy guide by my side, I was quickly able to smooth things out and enjoy the Japanese titles in all their glory. So unlike most international fans relying on localization, by the time the first game in the Go Trilogy was localized, I had my hands on a shiny new copy of Inazuma 11 Go Galaxy. And I'm sorry to say this, but you guys missed out. Galaxy was definitely an interesting. It might have been forgotten, but it was far from forgettable, but at the same time was extremely flawed. Before I can explain this dichotomy, however, I need to go into a little history of the evolution of Inazuma 11's battle mechanics. Inazuma 11 has always been about 3 E's, as I put it: evolution, execution, and endo. Evolution was so core to the Inazuma 11 model, its developer level 5 were willing to ignore narrative consistency and the laws of physics as long as changes were executed in a satisfying way. In the 1-3 trilogy, this evolution largely applied to the stakes and settings involved, not mechanics. I imagine because they worked in their simplicity. As they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yes, having so few options for customization and access to a far more limited range of abilities had its downsides, but most, like myself, didn't care because in its simplicity it added challenge. At no point was it easy to level up or get that S-Class certification, so winning Inazuma 11 1-3 became a matter of sheer graft, determination, and carefully executed strategy. By the release of the new trilogy, however, level 5 were interested in a fresh start to clearly distinguish old and new. So new layers of complexity slowly began to be added that worked and also didn't at the same time. In the first game of the trilogy, the big change from the Endo era was the introduction of the Keshin system. The easiest way to describe Keshins is as a kind of spirit mecha that are deployed by individual players with their own unique strengths, weaknesses, and abilities. As were all changes brought forward from this point, there were massive pros and cons to its introduction. On the pro side, they were a delight to the eyes and introduced a new level of strategic thinking. But on the con side, they also created a series of difficulty and balance issues that would plague the entire trilogy from this point. Just like adding a new piece to a chessboard, introducing any new features to a game requires devs to think very carefully about how to balance the old and the new to avoid any knock-on effects. Unfortunately, it seems that from Inazuma 11 Go, level 5 were more interested in introducing new pieces to the puzzle than checking if they fit. From the Keshin onward, this created a kind of wild west situation, where things got crazier and more fun to look at, but were less interesting to play with. When the Keshin system was first introduced in Inazuma 11 Go, things weren't so bad, but with Chrono Stone, shit got crazy. Mix and Max and Keshin Armed enabled complete domination of your opponents. Even as a child, I remember being able to easily beat nigh every team that wasn't at the very top of the food chain, which, I'm not gonna lie, took something out of the game. And this is where Galaxy comes into play. You see, the final game in the Go Trilogy would represent the peak of this formula and all of its spectacular contradictions. It's a kind of unpredictable, over-the-top mess with more systems and abilities than sense, but it's also very fun to play, visually spectacular, and tactically interesting, for a reason I'll explain later. But I'll start with the more mixed aspects. Inazuma 11 Go Galaxy dramatically amplified the insanity of Chrono Stone. Not only were the various systems introduced in the second game, from Mixi Match to Keshin's, maintained, but a new and somewhat complicated feature known as Souls were also introduced, without any thought to how to balance them. Souls are kind of innate spirits, symbolized by an animal form that players could draw from to access a new state and set of abilities. Unlike Keshin's, Souls gained in power as the player committed actions and were governed by a separate SP point mechanism. But like Keshin's, they were completely OP and unbalanced. And so really, the game was exceptionally easy. There's no other way to put it. But as I said, there was also an interesting aspect to the introduction of the Souls. A new tactical element that had never been seen in the Inazuma 11 series, and introduced something that went against the entire methodology of the series: genuine unpredictability. Usually in an Inazuma 11 game, if you simply understood the in-game mechanics very well and planned in advance, any opponent was at your mercy. Until Go Galaxy. You see, the Souls form has an extra feature that I haven't mentioned, the roulette. When you execute a Hisatsu or special technique for the noobs, while in Soul form, a roulette wheel spins and gives you a random skill or boon that can be the difference between failure and success. Because of this system and the unique setting, it's literally in space, I would recommend giving this series a go. But hey, it's up to you. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. If you didn't, tell me why. I'm actually interested.